Hello, everyone, and inside today's episode of Locked On Canadiens, we are goalie heavy today. We're going to talk Carey Price's future cap hit. We're going to talk Samuel Montembeault contract, and it's Friday. That means it's time for the Friday Mailbag. All that and more inside today's show.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 901 of Locked On Canadiens. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We are your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, or every other day in the off-season here in Hockeyland. Available wherever you get your daily podcast and on YouTube if you are watching our shining faces here. It is Friday. That means it is the Friday Mailbag episode. We will get into that later on in the show. But first, introductions. I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Metlin. I'm joined, as always, by the active stick, Laura Saba. And Laura, it is almost the weekend. We are a few days removed from the Jeff Petrie trade. We are waiting for Kent Hughes to do that thing that he does again, which, knowing our luck, will happen tomorrow after this episode launches. But how are you doing on what is a very nice Thursday evening here in Buffalo? You're heading out of town this weekend.
I am, so I will not be on the Monday episode, unfortunately, but you were in good hands with Scott. I am just taking a little road trip. It's been a little while since you've seen me take a break from the show. Actually, that's not true. Scott gave me the night off on my birthday. So either way, I'm excited, but I think we kind of have to talk about Carey Price now before it becomes obsolete. Kind of like the Jeff Petrie thing. We had to talk about it before it became obsolete.
And this is the thing, is that on the episode before the Jeff Petrie trade came down, Laura had come up with topics for us to discuss on the show that were still very, very relevant and now have become more relevant into this episode here following the Jeff Petrie trade with salary retention. Kent Hughes specifically mentioned Carey Price and his cap hit and everything going into this upcoming season. And I believe the quote was, they are working to get it so they don't have to put him on LTIR right now to get cap compliant. They want to be able to fit his contract under the cap ceiling and then place him on LTIR to give them maximum flexibility during the regular season. They are currently $3.7 million over the cap, which means a trade will be coming, or movement of some kind will be coming here shortly. I would imagine so. But going into this, it seems like, and this was floated in the Eyes on the Prize Slack, is can the Canadiens move that deal to a team that maybe needs a little bit bigger LTIR pool to play around with, or was going to want that? It's $10.5 million. They're not going to retain salary on a guy who's never playing again. I don't think they're going to do that. All signs are pointing to, this is not going to be a he's retiring kind of thing here. I think that we're all in agreement on that. I'm just curious, do you think that they might move this contract before it's this contract, like it's not Carey Price himself, but figure out a way to shift that for maybe another LTIR, contract there and swap them? I think it was Jared Book that I was talking to offline, who mentioned, would Matt Murray make sense? Toronto needs more LTIR space, and Matt Murray gets the Canadiens below that threshold before they LTIR him to start the season.
I think it makes absolute sense. The difference between Matt Murray and Carey Price, I think, is that for Carey Price, it's a longer situation. You're stuck with more for longer, but you also, at the end of the day, get more cap savings for longer, right? Like that's kind of the trade-off. If it's an administrative issue that's kind of weighing on you or your cap or your team or whatever, like in my mind, I think it's best to get rid of it. But at the same time, like I see a lot of teams wanting that flexibility. I see a lot of teams that the issue for them would be, how do I initially get cap compliant? Because you have to be under the cap to start the season in order to like maximize your savings, right?
Yes.
That's what Kent Hughes A wants to do and B seems to think he is going to do. So all of these other teams, they're going to have to find a way to push that down before they start calling people up or whatever. So that, to me, like, that's where I'm not 100% clear on which teams would be the best, the ideal situation for Carey Price's hit. But I think it's really intriguing for Matt Murray, because it's an interdivisional trade. You're helping out a division rival. Yeah, I know. But you're also taking on this like extremely strange contract that potentially maybe never should have been signed in Toronto, or never should have been offered by Toronto.
The thing is, and I think it was Andrew Berkshire pointed this out, is that Kent Hughes this year has shaved almost $3 million off the Canadiens cap situation and shifted it to next year. He's added $2 million in cap to next, or almost $3 million in cap next year. But, and this is, again, the salary cap is supposed to, and if you're not watching on YouTube, I am doing the heaviest air quotes I've ever done on this show. It's supposed to rise significantly. They're talking, $8 to $11 million, I think, which one for the Canadiens means that Carey Price will fit under their cap ceiling easily here, even with other extensions hitting next season. They should be able to fit that in there, and then LTIR and with whatever comes from that. But I also think the biggest thing is they don't want to have to use LTIR unless they have to. They want to get under that cap space and have the flexibility to maneuver on their own without, and I don't want to call it chicanery because it's just part of the game, but part of it is making all that work. Matt Murray coming off the books sooner allows them to do that. But at the same time, having Carey Price's LTIR pool is kind of a good thing, because you want to be as close to the cap ceiling as possible before you put the player on LTIR to maximize the amount of savings that are in there. Tampa got really good at this when they acquired Brent Seabrook. They got in under like $3,000 close to the cap and then LTIR'd him. It opens up the most possible space for you to use there. And Ken Hughes knows this. He's an agent. And I know that John Sedgwick and the other people in the Canadiens front office know this. I don't think they're going to trade this. Their best case scenario is that Carey Price goes, I'm just happy to retire and take a an ambassador role, a front officer. We've talked about this with, what Carey Price could do for the Canadiens when that day comes. I also don't think giving up $10.5 million is a thing that he wants to do, and I don't blame him for that. That's your money. You've earned that. I'd be shocked if they trade the contract, but I also wouldn't be at all, because I think Kent Hughes needs that $10.5 million for this season at least. That allows them to maybe shed a couple of deals here, maybe take on another contract or two that might be poor to get assets for that. And then next year when that cap rises and they want to start being a lot more competitive, they should be more competitive this year, but I mean a lot more competitive next year. They want to have their own cap flexibility in there. And I imagine we're not going to see anything on the Carey Price front this season. Again, would be shocked. I said the same thing about Shea Weber, and he got traded for an actual player. So, like, who knows what's going to happen with that. But I think Carey Price on LTIR, it is going to lead into the interesting spot here is who or what is moving out, because they want to get under that cap there, and they are $3.7 million over. There's a goalie on the Canadiens roster who makes $3.8 million. We're going to talk about the other Canadiens goalies, what's going on with contract negotiation, everything coming up in our next segment. But first, as I said, today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. And football season is kicking off. The preseason is going on right now, and FanDuel is giving you chances to win all season long, because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Pick any team you want to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every single game that they win. You can use it on the point spread, player props, over-under, and so much more at FanDuel.com. It's all fast, super easy to use, safe, secure, and you can get paid out instantly. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. And as always, please remember to bet responsibly whenever you are betting on sports. We are, of course, Locked On Canadiens. We just got done kind of discussing Carey Price, long-term injury reserve, LTIR, for this upcoming season. And Ken Hughes said they want to be under that so they can fit Price on the roster and then LTIR him to get the most of those savings for this season. They are $3.7 million over the cap. There are a handful of players that if they were traded, like immediately would help with that situation. One of them is Jake Allen. Jake Allen makes 3.825, I believe, this season and next season with his contract extension. But I don't think they're going to trade Jake Allen right away. And this kind of brings into the point of this whole segment is there haven't been any, I'm trying to think of the word, outward reaching, going forward in terms of the Samuel Montembeault extension. We thought like this was going to get done way earlier in the summer, that they were going to give him 2 to 3 years. Everyone's happy, done, dusted. He gets 2.5, 1.75, whatever it is. He gets a nice raise off of what he was making to be the Canadian starting goalie this year. Marc-Antoine Godin, who is now working for, I believe it
CBC.
is CBC.
Well, Radio Canada, but CBC.
Yes, which gone fantastic to see him back covering hockey for another outlet after being let go by the Athletic. And he said there have been no, headway made on this, that everyone is still very, happy. No one is unhappy. There's no demands being made in any direction. It's just that there hasn't been any, parlays made in terms of this. And I guess my first question is, are we worried? I mean, he's under contract going into this season, so I'm not worried about that. But are we worried that this deal isn't going to get done at all right now?
No, I'm not worried about the Samuel Montembeault part. I do think that there's probably a little bit of contention in terms of the dollars based on the improvement in his performance and the expectations that there are going to be of him next season. For me, like the Canadiens just kind of have too many goalies right now, even though they don't have enough goalies, if that makes sense. And they've got 2 bona fide backups in Jake Allen and Casey DeSmith. We know that Kent Hughes has told Casey DeSmith to be patient, but we don't know necessarily if that means that he's going to trade him away or if he's going to change his mind and think that Casey DeSmith should be the backup for Samuel Montembeault, right? So that to me is the big question, because cap-wise, obviously, it makes more sense to trade Jake Allen. In terms of desirability, too, it feels like Jake Allen would probably have more of a market. I'm not 100% sure on that. Because again, Casey DeSmith is a serviceable backup goaltender. But I also think, like, at what point are you going to give Caden Primo that shot? Because did you just sign him for 3 years for him to be an AHL goaltender for 3 years? I don't think that was the plan. And then we've got all these other prospects that the Canadiens should take a look at, which admittedly they're a couple steps away. I find, for me, like, Samuel Montembeault is not the question. It's all the other goaltending.
And the thing with Samuel Montembeault, that the part of this that concerns me is that, are they trying to play the long game to get better value on this? And I believe it was Godin who pointed this out as well, is that if he plays well going into, like, let's say preseason is preseason, you can write off preseason. Carey Price had bad preseasons, then went on to be the best goalie in the world because that's who he is. If Samuel Montembeault comes out and continues to post good numbers like he did last regular season to start the year, you are watching his value tick up every single time that he plays. And then you're Kent Hughes going from, okay, maybe it was a 2-year, $1.85 million a year deal or $2.1 million, whatever it is, to, oh, he's 2.5. Oh, he's 2.6. He's 2.8. He's over 3. And if he's playing that well, you are then putting yourself in danger of, okay, I am now paying for him coming off the best years of his career here. And if he comes out and posts a 9-10 save percentage, a little above league average last year, and he's your 1A goaltender, okay, did you miss the boat on trying to sign him at the right time here? And I think that's a problem. That is the only part that concerns me. I think a deal will get done. I think there's still plenty of time. I know Ken Hughes has been dealing with this, so he may have just told Samuel Montembeault directly, this is a thing that's going on right now. I need a moment. Please, let me sort this out. I think Casey DeSmith is still going to get moved. I think as a serviceable NHL backup on a cheaper contract than Jake Allen, someone is going to look at that and go, okay, sure. But also Jake Allen being a known quantity veteran, being a solid backup to Carey Price for a long time and a good 1B starter, there are teams that are going to want that. Maybe someone who needs that little extra boost there. Because I see teams talking about Buffalo and that they should go for Connor Hellebuck when they have Devin Levi. And my thought is, why not get a good 1B for that? Do you trade Jake Allen in division? I don't know. I don't think Samuel Montembeault is going to be the name that they trade unless they think that there is a high value out there, that he is coming off a very strong season, that they think teams will offer them more. My thought is they're trying to see where the waters lie on Casey DeSmith first and then going from there. I think Ken Hughes is trying to sort out that little bit first. And if he can't do that, he's going to sign Montembeault and then kind of go from there at that point.
And I think that's probably the best way to approach this, to be honest. Again, I don't know where Kent Hughes is going to send either one of these goaltenders, but I have a strong feeling that there's a good possibility that was redundant. I have a strong feeling that come trade deadline, neither of these two is going to be a Montreal Canadien.
And here's the thing, and we haven't talked, you mentioned it, and I'm glad you did, is this Caden Primo's year? Because as it stands right now, he's going to go to the AHL. They do not have, Montembeault probably wouldn't clear waivers. DeSmith probably would, but he probably wouldn't be happy about it. And then are you going to have an unhappy guy in the AHL? And you're not going to put Jake Allen on waivers because that just seems like an offense to your veteran goaltender there. If Caden Primo steps up this year and is, good, like let's say actually good, if he plays well in the preseason and if they need him in the regular season, he plays well, you shift as many of that out there and you go, okay, it's Primo and Montembeault. It's Primo and Allen. It's hopefully not Primo and DeSmith because I don't think Casey DeSmith could be a 1A starter here. And you wait for these other guys to develop there. I am now wondering, though, if the Montembeault extension went from being multiple years to it's 1 year and they play it year by year. If he comes out and is good this year, do they offer him more time? The lack of any news around it is concerning because it was so red hot coming into the summer. Like before the draft, this was one of the things that people were talking about, that this deal will be done. Samuel Montembeault is going to get a nice extension, playing well in Montreal from Kent Hughes, especially having to play injured the one season. And then it just died off completely. And yeah, part of it was the NHL draft. And then all of a sudden this Erik Karlsson three-team trade here happened. I'm wondering if it's just more of a situational circumstance that it hasn't gotten done because other things came up more than Kent Hughes doesn't want this to get done.
I agree. I think it's like other things have come up because I do think that Kent Hughes in the last couple of weeks has shown himself to be like, even on the low activity summer holiday kind of days, he's still working the phones. He's still got his finger on the pulse and he's still got a plan and he's still willing to make some sacrifices. There's been some mixed reactions to the Jeff Petrie return, which is understandable. This is a very, very diverse fan base with lots of opinions. But I think, you know what, like none of these trades are going to 100% please everybody, but the Canadiens being able to unload players, I think, is the key here. So if we do see trades, and there's going to be a lot of questions in the mailbag about this kind of stuff, if we do see trades, I think rather than getting rid of X or Y person, getting rid of cap hits, or getting rid of a person taking the roster spot from somebody you're trying to develop, like that's going to be the philosophy, not just like this player is having a bad season or this player or whatever. It's more, is this player taking up a roster spot or is this player taking up too much space on this cap? Yes.
And speaking of mailbag questions, because we do love mailbag questions, it is one of the bases, I don't know, of this podcast. It is Friday when you're listening to this anyways. That means it's time for the Friday Mailbag where we answer listener questions, and that's all coming up next. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens. Remember, if you ever want to tweet us your mailbag questions or post us your stupid Elon at LO_Canadiens on the app formerly known as Twitter. You can send us emails at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com if you want to expand on that, or in the YouTube comments, as long as you're one respectful and you put mailbag question at the top of that so we can see that in the comments to make sure we add it to this episode. We do love listener questions. It's the best part of it because some of these make us think, and then some of these make us think that you might need to be seen by somebody. Laura, what do we have in the mailbag for this week?
So this one is a really nice email. It's from Richard, not the architect, in the emails. Richard is a first-time question asker, and says that we are both always so cheery, even when you're probably not feeling it. Oh, Richard, if only you knew, if you had to do a podcast 5 days a week, 3 days a week, sometimes you do have to put on a cheeriness, even if you're not feeling it. But I'm really glad that it is being noticed and appreciated, because sometimes I got to tell you. All right. The question is, I see the wisdom in trading Jeff Petrie and was expecting this to happen, but it's left me with the question. Given the number of young defensemen the Habs have, would it not have been good for the Habs to hold on to Petrie, at least until the trade deadline, to give him a chance to mentor a stable full of young defensemen? What would a year's worth of Petrie mentorship have been worth?
It all depends. Is this going to be the Jeff Petrie who played really well under Martin St. Louis originally? Or is this going to be the Jeff Petrie who, well, was fine, had some issues in Pittsburgh and before Martin St. Louis came in? Because if you trade for him, bring him in, and he's like washed, not useful at all, you lose value on that. And then they were already going to retain salary on this, but are you driving the value down on what you get for him at all? I wouldn't have been opposed to it, but I think it's more cap work than Kent Hughes and the office were prepared to do, which is why they were like, we're going to work on getting him moved out and we're going to trade him as soon as we can for the benefit of him and just so we don't have the lingering questions. I think he would have been a really good mentor for someone like a Jordan Harris, someone like an Arbor Xhekaj who has some defensive, well, not Jordan Harris, but like an Arbor Xhekaj, Justin Barron, who has offensive upside, but sometimes, in their own zone tends to be a little bit waffly, a little bit with the puck, that there's a lot to learn there. And I understand it, but I just think if this was last year and Edmondson was already gone, or they could move Savard and then brought Petrie back in, it would make sense. But this year, they've got so many bodies on defense that there's going to be prospects in the AHL that we're maybe not expecting right away. And we got to be prepared for that. Adding Petrie to that mix only pushes someone else further down the depth chart.
I think that's the big key here. So for me, I feel like there kind of wasn't a choice, but at the same time, like I do respect the question and the spirit of the question. And for me, I think what the Canadiens need to do is make sure that their development has somebody on staff that would have provided that mentorship that Jeff Petrie could have. So that was a really nice question, and we really appreciate it. And we have a couple more. We've got one from JD Hernandez of the Locked On Anaheim Ducks podcast. Hi, Scott and Laura, huge fan. Thanks, JD, from a fellow Locked On host. 2 questions. 1, which Laval player could you see making the biggest strides and possibly cracking the Habs roster this year? And 2, just for fun, which dog breeds would represent some of the Habs roster? So we actually did do dog breeds. I want to say it wasn't last week, but the week before.
Yes.
So check that one out. And those were some really good ones. But the Laval question, which player could you see making the biggest strides and possibly cracking the Habs roster?
I think this year twofold, Jaden Struble and William Trudeau on defense. William Trudeau went from kind of a guy no one really expected anything of to being probably the Rockets' best defenseman last year inside a handful of months. Beyond that, Xavier Simoneau. And Hattie Kalakash, it loves Xavier Simoneau. He's 5'6" of nothing but piss and vinegar. And I love that. I think he has every quality to follow, maybe not the Michael Pezzetta route, but the Brendan Gallagher, Raphael Harvey-Pinard, that he works really hard in the AHL, works hard for his points, scores big goals, and finds himself working there. His effort is tireless. He is a bulldog on skates, and he drives other teams nuts, like absolutely bonkers. He's someone I could see maybe getting, if he's on a nice little heater for the Rocket and they need someone in the bottom six in Montreal, you run a Pizzetta Simino pair on a fourth line and you're going to drive everybody nuts. I'm a big fan, and I can't wait to see what he does in his sophomore season here.
So Massimo on Twitter asks, on Tuesday, Kent Hughes implied that they'd be able to fit under the cap with CP's full contract come October. Clearly, he's hinting at another trade or multiple trades in the works. Seems like a goalie will inevitably be traded. See our last segment. But who else can you see being moved before opening night? So Massimo's guess is David Savard. My guess is obviously still Christian Dvorak.
I think Christian Dvorak is injured, which I was not aware of originally, but I do very much think Christian Dvorak is that guy. And I'm kind of just looking at the roster here. I don't think it's going to be Yoel Armia. It would be great if it was, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be. But I do think that we could see, I think very much it's Christian Dvorak, a team that's like, we don't need him immediately, but he gets healthy, comes back into the lineup and creates some offense or fills in into the middle six on another team somewhere else after a couple of months or a couple of weeks afterwards. It makes the most sense because you look at the Canadiens now, you have Suzuki, you have Doc, you have Newhook, you have Monahan, you have Evans, and you have some guys in the AHL. Yeah, you still have Christian Dvorak to fit in there, but at the same time, it's a lot of centers and a lot of guys to move around there. And they see Newhook as a center, and I think that he is the de facto replacement for Christian Dvorak at this point.
Our friend Emma Lilly asks, if you could make a Habs only puck doku, what would the categories be? So I'm going to be really honest. I haven't played puck doku.
I love puck doku so much.
So busy with my day job that I literally have not. I barely have time to eat or sleep. So Scott, can you tell me what puck doku is?
So puck doku has 3 columns going, this way and 3 columns going this way. And you have usually team, and then like a stat, and then team. So it'll be like Habs, Leafs, 50 career NHL fights, and then like Ottawa, New York Islanders, San Jose Sharks. And you have to match up a player who fits in the cross section of each of those. So like a player who played for the Habs and the Senators, who would that player be? Habs and the Islanders, who would that player be? Habs and the Sharks, who would that player be? And then on this way, be like, okay, same thing. A player played for Ottawa, the Habs, Leafs, and has 50 plus career fights in there. And my thought was it would be Habs Nordiques in that top circle, in that top square there, just because for fun. And then just teams that I don't know if the Canadiens have traded a lot with or that have had multiple crossovers. Like, I don't think there are a lot of, like, Vegas doesn't really count, but like Habs and Florida Panthers, like players who have crossed over there. And then in the last one, like, 100-point plus seasons in there. It's people who create puck doku, I give them all the credit in the world because it can't be easy and it's very easily addicting because it scratches the very fun part of your brain where you can make an obvious answer. Like if you have a Habs Nordique segment and you say Guy Lafleur, okay, you and like 60% of other people are going to have guessed that, but getting more and more obscure players makes it really, really fun. Like I've had somewhere I picked Andreas Martinson and it's like 0.2% of people guess this. It's great when you want to scratch that I know way too much stuff about random stuff part of my brain. So I play that when I'm usually, on lunch or waiting for a work call.
We actually had a Nemesis question, which I now cannot find. And it was
I know this one. I actually know this one.
Okay, tell me what the question is, because I remember he asked it and he said like he was giving us lead time, and I don't remember. It's a trick. It's our Nemesis. It's a trick.
So we have to FMK the Rice Krispies elves, so snap, crackle, pop, but as the sound of them happening in our body.
Snap, crackle, and pop?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay.
The K for me is snap. No good has ever come from my own body when I have heard something snap.
Yes.
Whether that be my toe, my shoulder, or my ankle, none of them were great. And all of them required me going to the hospital at some point. None of those were good. No. K, immediately.
Okay. What about a crackle then? Does that mean you're on fire?
No. So here's the hard part. Like, because I can, crack my knuckles. And does that count as a crackle? Because I like doing that, but it's a temporary thing. But this is where it gets hard because pop can mean a couple of things.
It can mean good or bad.
Yeah, I have dislocated my shoulder, which it was a popping noise. But also, I have felt like the air bubble, like in my spine when you get your back cracked and you feel that dull, thick pop through your spine. And it is the best feeling in the world.
Mm-hmm. Or when your ears get unclogged, like when you're in a high pressure zone.
Yes.
Like on a flight or whatever, like the pop where like they like whatever, the liberation pop, like that's a good one.
I think I'm going to put pop at F because I can't say it on this podcast and I don't want to edit this podcast any further because it rides on that line of it can be good or it can be bad. That's the risk you take with like even one night stands. Who knows? So the M, the Mary is definitely going to be crackle because like you can crack your back. I can crack my neck. I can crack my knuckles. I used to be able to crack my sternum, which was always a very weird thing when it happened. It felt great. It was horrifying, but it was great. So I think it is.
There's so many people squirming right now while they're listening to this, if they've listened this far.
Welcome to the ASMR Locked On Canadiens. I'm going to crack my knuckles for the next 3 hours. I'm just kidding.
Not,
no, because I already cracked them. They're not going to be able to be cracked for a while. Because the thing is, like, I can, like, when I rotate my shoulder now, it kind of pops and crackles anyways, which I should probably go get that looked at. Carly, if you're listening to this, sorry. But I think it is very simple. It's simple. F is pop. M is...
No, F is... Oh, yeah, sorry.
M is crackle, and K is snap. No good has ever come from snap. Never, ever, 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 ever.
Okay. I am in 100% agreement with everything you just said.
Well, Will, you'll have to let us know how we did. I'm sure I'll get your answer first thing in the morning.
As always, 2 other questions, but we're going to switch them to next week for extremely topical reasons, and the askers know why.
Yes. This is, as always, pardon me, if you want to send us your mailbag questions at LO_Canadiens on the app formerly known as Twitter, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. Follow Laura at The Active Stick. Follow myself at Scott Matla. Follow the podcast wherever you get your daily podcasts, Google, Apple, Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube. We hit 3,000 subscribers. We'll probably eat something gross because that's what we do. And we love to do live streams from time to time, hang out with guests and chat and have a good time. We will see you all next week, everybody.